Okay, so here's the fun part. Here's where we create everything from scratch inside of Dreamweaver. We're going to create a form to connect to the database. We're going to create a database connection, and we're going to let Dreamweaver build our forms for us using the Dreamweaver insertion wizard. I'm going to show you how simple and how exciting this is to create PHP database connected dynamic web pages. So let's get started. So file new, we're going to make a new PHP page. So new PHP page and hit create. Okay, so this is going to be the admin page. So we're going to save this file inside of a folder called, let's save this in a folder called admin, A-D-M-I-N. And this will be the index page for the admin folder. This page is going to be password protected, so we're going to simply call this the index page. Now, if you looked at my other videos, it makes total sense to title the page. So we're simply going to put in generically mysite.com. I put in pipe symbol, which is up and down arrow key, the one below the delete key, and let's just call this admin section. Now we're going to do some exciting things here. We're going to password protect this page, and then we're going to greet the person that logged into the site. So whoever logged into the site, we're going to greet that person and basically password protect the page. So how do we do this? First of all, we need to go to Window, Databases. Now when you bring up databases, that brings up these different tabs here. So I have Database tab, Binding tab, Server Behaviors. This is tied into the CSS styles. That's totally optional. If you want to separate it, you can just drag it out. If you want to put it back in, just drag it back in. Totally up to you on how you want to work this. So databases, bindings, server behaviors. Now, similar to an FTP connection, the FTP connection has already been established and set up. If you need to, you can go to my FTP training video on how to connect your site with FTP server. So I assume that you know how to do that, and I assume it's already set up. So we're going to connect to the database. Now this only needs to be done one time. Once it's done the first time, you don't have to do it again. Now, important to understand, this is database per database, not per table. So you can have a database that can contain many tables. I can have a database that contains a customer service table, a admin table, a products table. So this connection right here is for a new database connection. So I select the database tab and hit the plus symbol. Now, whatever you call this connection name, it's going to make a PHP page with that same name. So if I call this, say, let's generically call this my. Okay, so that's the name of my file. So we're going to connect through localhost. Now, you would have to check with your server company to see how to connect to their MySQL server. But if you use my server, which I'm offering a free service right now for free by buying my training video for $39, you get access to my SQL database for 3 months free with all the web hosting features. So we're going to put in the username. Okay, now for security purposes, I'm not going to give you, obviously, my username and password. You would put your username in here, and you put your password in here. Now, if that information is correct, you'll be able to click here, and that's going to select the database that you have access to use. So again, you would put in the username and the password that you set up in MySQL when you created the database wizard from the first video. So whatever you put in there for your username and password, remember, most servers put the username for the account underscore whatever you call your username. So basically it would be the account username underscore your username and whatever your password happens to be. So once that's correct, you can hit select, and that's going to go and connect to the database. Now again, for security purposes, I'm not going to show you the real password, obviously, for my server. So we're going to move forward from here. So you would set this up under, let's review this again. we go to database connection and hit mysql connection. So whatever you call this connection, it's going to create a PHP page with that same connection. So once you set up your database connection by clicking here to set up your MySQL connection under databases, it's going to basically create that SQL connection to connect to your server. So again, this only has to be done per database, not per table, per database. I just want to be very clear about that. Now what that did, that stored that file inside your root directory inside the connections folder. So inside the connections folder, it created the connections folder for you, and it put that PHP page inside the connections folder. So again, it's this file here. Whatever you called your file here, so if you called your file Mickey, it created a PHP file called Mickey, and it put it inside the connections folder. Now it's going to use that file throughout the entire application to connect to the server, to connect to the MySQL server. So we're building an application totally from scratch to connect to the server. So you only have to do that one time. Once it's set up, you don't have to keep going back to that. It will include that onto the page when you write to the database. Now, important step here. Again, you have 3 separate tabs: database, bindings, server behaviors. We're going to be doing most of our work inside of server behaviors. Again, if this palette is missing, it's under window, databases. Now, in this particular case, I have my databases included with my server behaviors and my CSS styles. That's just a personal preference, but that's totally up to you. Okay? Now, what we need to do here is we want to greet the person who logs into this page. So how can we do this? Well, first of all, very important step here. If you want to see information on the page from the database, it has to come from a record set. So record set. So let's review that. If you want to see the information from the database dynamically on this PHP page, it's coming from a record set of records, record set. So how do we do this? Well, we simply go to the plus symbol, and based on these choices, we're going to make a record set. Now, it's going to be much simpler if you go to the simple section to do this, because you're learning this from scratch. Okay, so we're going to say what we're going to call this. This is the admin record set, because we're going to talk the admin table. Now in our database, we only have one table right now. That's the admin table. So protocol dictates it's lowercase rs, and we're just going to call this admin. Okay, now you have to pick a connection. Now by default, Dreamweaver CS5 and CS5.5 pick the first connection script that it finds. In this particular case, it was this connection script, the one we made about 5 minutes ago using database connections. Now, since there's only one table, that's the only choice that I have for tables. Now, extremely important step here, I want to get you to think the way the software thinks. I want you to think how the database thinks. 90% of doing database is pure, simple logic. You're saying, I'm doing this before I do that, etc., etc., etc. So before you do anything, you have to logically, deductively think about what you want to accomplish. So this particular case, the objective here is to make this page password protected, log on to the page, and then greet that person. So greet Joe, greet Bill, greet whoever we're basically talking to get to this page. Okay, so how can we do this? Well, we need to, based on these choices here, we need to filter something. We need to filter one of these field names. So these are the field names we created inside of our database. So which one of these fields is going to be unique that the user is going to remember? Now, the user is probably not going to remember their user ID, nor do you want to torture them and have them remember the user ID. Users remember their emails. So basically, we're going to filter the email address, okay? Because that's the de facto field that the user is going to remember. So we're going to filter the email address. Email address is going to be a session variable. Now be careful about this. This is not a server variable. We're going to create a session variable. Session variable can be whatever you want the session variable to be. We can call it my var as an example. Let's simply call this user underscore var underscore let's put 2012. So that will simply be the name of a variable that's going to be stored in a session variable to filter the email. So basically the person's email is going to be a session variable. So from here I can hit the return key or hit OK. Now we want to test this. Remember, we have two email addresses here. First email address was one email address was Tom Smith. So that was just simply ts@email.com. Now, I don't know who owns this email address. I totally just made this up. So this is not a real life email address, nor does it matter. It's simply an email address that I put inside the admin section. So if this is correct, you can hit OK. It's going to show you Tom Smith. Okay, now this is a little bit of a problem with the program here. If you hit test, this field only allows X amount of characters. So if your email is longer than this, you technically can't test it. It's still going to work, but you can't test it. Just want to be clear about that. So I hit OK. Now, important step. Here's how the software thinks. Okay, record set. Here's my record set of records. It put all this code built for you inside of this page. You don't have to recreate this. It created it for you. Okay, so that's why you want to use Dreamweaver for this. This way, you don't have to know this silly code. So, how it works here is the record sets create bindings. Bindings populate the page. Record sets create bindings. Bindings populate the page. Get that thought into your head. If you want to see the information from the database on the page, it has to come from a record set. Set of records, record set. So again, server behaviors create bindings. Bindings populate the page. So if I twirl down here, I can come over here to my page and I can say, welcome. Learning how to spell would certainly help. Welcome to the admin section. Now, welcome who? Well, we want to welcome the person who logged into the site. So we're going to take the first name field. We're going to put that right here. I'm going to put my cursor right there. Go to first and drag that right to here. Now, similar to back in the day mail merge programs, like WordPerfect had a mail merge program, Microsoft Word has a mail merge program. This is basically how it works. This is dynamic field. This information is going to dynamically be generated from the server, the MySQL server served up through PHP code using PHP MySQL. So we're going to say welcome, comma, space. Okay, so let's think about this intuitively. If we launch this page right now, not much is going to happen here because I need to log in to know who is logging into the server so I can greet the person. If you launch this page right now, it's simply going to say welcome to the admin section. It's not going to know who to welcome because we haven't created the login page. So I just want to share that simple thought with you. Okay, so from here, we're going to go to server behaviors, and based on these choices, these are my choices, all dialog box, all menus are based on choices. So choices, based on these choices, user authentication. Based on these choices, what do we want to do? Well, we want to restrict the access to the page. We're not ready to create the login user yet because that's a separate page. we're going to go to user authentication and restrict the access to the page. Brings up this dialog box. Okay, based on these choices, now we're going to keep this very simple here. We're simply going to restrict this based on the username and password, but you could choose to add another field in your database called level access and restrict the access based on the person's username, password, and access level. So as an example, if you have several employees, maybe a manager and assistant manager, maybe you have your coworkers, then you have your interns. Well, you probably don't want your intern accessing your database, so they can have maybe level 1. The owner of the site could be level 9. You can set that up in your database. In my full video series that I'm selling for $39, we go through this totally in depth. Okay, so based on these choices here, username and password, we're going to go to a page called login. Now, this page has not been created yet. We're going to create it in just a second. So based on these choices, restrict the access to the page, we're going to hit OK. So let's review this. Okay, we went up here to server behaviors. We clicked the plus symbol. We said user authentication and restrict access to the page. Now, if you want to make changes to that, you would simply double click. Now, of course, we're not going to make a change to this. Now, what we've done here is this created the code for restricting access to the page. So you didn't have to do this. It created the code for you. How cool is that? So make a change, save a change.